Good evening, viewers, and welcome to another edition of the Business Perspective for January 19, 2012. I'm your host, Jose Alpuche. Tonight we will continue our series on public finances, and for this we have two very special guests sharing their perspective. Before going to our first break, we would like to thank our sponsors, Brothers Tabet Limited, Pandora's Window Box Nursery, the Angelus Press, Idea Lab Studios, and of course the BCCI Western Union Service, the only network that has been awarded the 5-Star Quality Service Award. We now go to our first break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our guests this evening are Mr. Kent Clare, Commissioner of Income Tax from the Income Tax Department, and Mr. Evan Brown, Assistant Commissioner of Sales Tax from the General Sales Tax Department. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to be here.
Gentlemen, in tonight's discussion, we hope to have a general discussion on the major tax regimes, and of course, for you to update us on the work your departments are doing, including the recently held tax fair. I would like to start off with an outline of the major tax sources and their contributions to total tax income for the government. Mr. Clare, you hope to start?
Yeah, well, recurrent revenue is about a little bit less than $800 million per year. And I think that the main, of course, the three main revenue earners are the Customs Department, General Sales Tax, and Income Tax Department. We are scheduled to collect something like about $259 million. That's more or less where, I guess, most of the revenue departments are on target. With Customs and with GST, and I'm sure Evan could explain this better, there are certain things which at one point would be within their purview, and then at another time it would be like, for example, let's say we had a situation with fuel, where at one point the GST was, General Sales Tax was on fuel, and I think at a certain point
the amendment was made.
Oh, yeah. So, but generally, our bigger earners would be the Customs and the GST department. Right.
The 259 is combined?
For income tax alone.
Oh, just for income tax
yeah,
alone?
Yeah, that's from a variety of, well, don't be alarmed. That's under income tax itself, PAYE accounts for about 25%. Petroleum will probably be just about maybe $60 million in when you look at the company petroleum income tax, and they're paying a petroleum surcharge when the price is over 90 per barrel. So,
but that's petroleum as it relates to domestic production?
No, that's
or in
crude
general?
Sales. That's crude. That's the sale of
crude. Yeah,
crude.
Our domestic
yes,
production.
Yes, certainly. That doesn't include the sol and these others. And then the rest would be a variety of taxes like contract tax, and of course the most predominant thing for us is the business tax, which is probably $175 million per year.
Good. And with GST, Mr.
For GST, like what Ken just mentioned, for GST and Customs, we are split in terms of the total revenue collected. We are scheduled to collect 87.5, and then for Customs, they do that apart for GST, where GST is collected at import.
Right.
In terms of our targets, I would say that we are on target, except for when you factor in the refund mechanism, taking that into consideration, we definitely will not be along the target line of what we should be collecting.
But this is, why is that disparity?
Well, you look at based on our budget that we did for fiscal year 2011-2012, looking at the refunds that were collected or that were paid out during the last fiscal year, we take into consideration looking at the last quarter of 2010-11 and factor the refunds that were placed on hold during that time. Has to be factored in the following fiscal period. So when we do that, we look at the offsetting that we do with the current period. So we always find that we would be behind in terms of putting into place the refunds that were not collected or were not disbursed.
So there's a higher carryover,
right?
Only from the last quarter.
From the last quarter.
Okay. And how income tax? Sorry, not income tax. Customs.
For customs,
duties.
the customs has always been on target in terms of the GST collected up front. The last amendment we had in terms of the special tax credit, where it's collected at customs, we on the other end would be dispersing for those that have the offsetting to do the $1. I think it's $1. $1 credit. The fuel, right?
Yeah, that's always because sometimes somebody had made a statement. They said that like in this world you have lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? You always have different people presenting different things, and it depends on the perspective. I was on a show recently where the custom officer said that they collect 54% of the recurrent revenue, and that's a perspective. But of course, they probably be including monies that they collected on behalf of GST. So there you go.
What's more or less their overall figure?
Probably, I think, about 270. I think.
Right.
Yeah, about
270. So in effect, they are the single.
Yeah, they still are.
Single largest, followed by income tax at 259.
Yes, and then GST. Property taxes, I think, was budgeted at about 7 million. I think it's maybe going to be about 5 or 6 million. Property taxes collected by the Lands Department,
not the municipal bodies.
Yeah. And then, of course, others are a variety of charges and fees, which, are collected, fines and licenses, that sort of thing.
Who keeps track of some of the other bodies that collect revenue for services? For example, Baja as an example.
Yeah. Well, I think everything is paid into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. And the Ministry of Finance would be the one monitoring that. I cannot say that there is any body collecting on behalf of the government of Belize which would not pass through that fund, except maybe in rare circumstances where you're dealing with maybe US dollar accounts, which might be deposited directly with the central bank. But the body to monitor all this, of course, would be the Ministry of Finance, and they do have a budget unit that is tasked with that.
You have an idea what that cumulative amount would be?
I'd have to research it. I honestly, I wouldn't want to give you a figure and then as I come off the show, I find out it's twice the amount.
Because that's an issue that we would want to look at a little bit earlier. These figures that you gave, trending as it relates to, let's say, over the last 10 years, increasing, decreasing. Well, I know with GST you've had changes in.
Well, for GST, yes, we have had changes in terms of the tax rate. But to look at the trend since its inception in 2006, we have the peak periods, and in those peak periods, it has stood constant. Even with the increase we have seen where within last year and up to this last tax period where it has been constant.
And with income tax?
Income tax, I think there are a couple of stories there. It's definitely been increasing our budget over the past 10 years. But some of that has to be with the fact that the economy has grown over time. And also I think that past commissioners would have put some initiatives in play to kind of ensure that the base was widened. Because you can look at what you're collecting and be satisfied, but again, you need to look at, for example, what statistics might be showing in terms of what is the tax gap. It's more important for us to understand who is not paying than to look at, who is paying. So a lot of initiatives towards identifying non-filers, I think that has contributed towards the increase that we have had. Yeah,
I know that from the private sector perspective, there's this view that, especially as it relates to GST, that the base can be broadened. And I'll put it in very simplistic terms. There are many stores that you go to and you don't get a receipt. Just using that as an indicator. Is it an area that you're looking at?
The question was posed to GST before, where we've looked at expanding the tax base and getting those smaller businesses registered. We have before us right now, as we speak, where we are looking at revising the GST Act and making some recommendation to the Ministry of Finance in terms of how we deal with smaller businesses which do not meet the requirements for registration, which the threshold is for 75,000. We're saying that we want to put our focus on the larger business that is paying the higher, or is the return for revenue is higher than what the smaller businesses are giving back to the government. And those would be more on the focus for business tax, where those would be in that net for business tax revenue.
You mean the smaller operations?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the threshold, we are saying that for the 75,000, which are approximate to $300 a day, where those businesses are underreporting their sales, we have employed different strategies to bring those into the net.
Mm. Because I do know originally there was this the introduction of the single tax identification number, the TIN number,
tax identification number,
which would have allowed you more in trade of goods to be able to follow through the trail of goods. Huh?
Yeah, the TIN is common to both GST and income tax departments.
And customs.
And customs uses
yeah,
it as well. You're going to clear something from customs, you're going to ask for the TIN. I think that some of the things that we ought to be aware of is that if you don't, the obvious thing is if you don't have one, then you can't do business there. What used to happen is that persons would perhaps come to one of the departments to get that number, trying to avoid the other one for one reason or the other. Now, I think the managements of both departments have put in place some controls to ensure, for example, that registration, issuing of things, so that's a way of cross-checking to make sure that we can publish a report that shows a taxpayer who is registered for business tax but not registered for GST.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of things that we can do amongst ourselves and are doing.
No, my understanding of the TIN would have been that in theory, if you import product X, you would be able to trace it somewhat to point of sale. Mm-hmm. That would require tremendous collaboration among the various agencies.
Yes.
Is that happening, or do we need to develop greater capacity there?
I think it is. I know the Ministry of Finance purposefully had us all sit together and we identified specific areas. I don't want to say targets, but we had specific areas where we said we're going to combine on audits to target different categories of taxpayers, whether it's small, medium, large. Right. And just because of a couple of things that we were doing recently, this recent revenue fair and other things that were happening, it was suspended a bit. But I know that those are ongoing and I think targeted for completion by the end of March. And the whole idea would be, after this is finished, whether or not you create a unit that is comprised of officers from all three as a continuing monitoring body. Mm-hmm. I think that's the thought behind it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think if I could just add to the discussions from GST, and yes, we have, as you asked the question, whether it has been happening, I could say to you, yes, GST for most part has been collaborating with customs getting the data on a monthly basis. I'll say from as far back as 2007, where we've been sharing that information, and again also sharing that side information with our sister department, Income Tax. And as Ken rightfully indicated, we do joint audits, joint collection, enforcement, and to the extent that we do taxpayer service publicity also.
Okay.
The collections need to be mentioned as well, because Jose, if you have a refund from GST and you owe income tax, and vice versa.
Right. So that in and of itself should say that it is working. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Gentlemen, we must go to our first break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let me remind you that we can continue this discussion by sharing our thoughts on the topic using the following tools: via email to businessperspective@belize.org, or you can post a comment on the Chamber's Facebook page, or better yet, you can use the virtual meeting place that is a part of the Chamber's website portal and post your comment there. The address is www.belize.org/VMP. Gentlemen, I would like to change the discussion a little and look at tax policy. In particular, tax reform initiatives announced, in particular by the Minister of Finance, that are to be undertaken by the IMF. Could you give us a little bit of background on the why and when this will occur?
Well, the Prime Minister had his economic forum, I think it was November last year, and he had made that statement that the request had been made and government was agreeable to having this done. The body that is targeted to do the review is really the IMF, but in December we had IDB was doing a similar study across the Caribbean in terms of looking at certain statistics and making recommendations for improved administrations and for tax reform. And so we decided to piggyback on that. So we had a consultant come in just about around the Christmas holidays, and we worked double duty to provide her with some information. We should have the results of those compilations and recommendations by the end of this month. And those will be used, those will be forwarded to IMF for them to make some qualitative analyses. Certainly one of the things in terms of reforms has to be this discussion about integration with a view to providing better service to Belize taxpayers, and particularly the business community. So I am saying that we expect that by the beginning of April, there should be some tangible evidence of some of the efforts to get those undergoing, and there should be something there that the discussions can start in terms of exactly where we're going in terms of if you're looking at rates, if that's your concern. If you're looking at...
That will always be our concern.
You're looking at maybe going from a gross basis back to a net basis. There are some implications, and I'm thinking that those discussions will happen then. But presently, it's a matter of just amassing the information, and so that we could, the data really, so that we could have something to work off. So that's what I'm seeing. I think that by April, you should see some movements towards this discussion about integration. Evan will tell you has been happening for some time.
For some time, indeed.
Right.
Looking at increasing our initiatives and for greater efficiency in public service, coming out at the PM's forum last November, we could say to you that presently there is a focus group that is looking at means and ways in which we could improve our performance in terms of compliance and revenue increase. In terms of where the integration is concerned, as we speak, there is a committee that is engaged in looking at both GST and income tax to see where we go with integration of both the collection section, taxpayer service, and to an extent the audit, which we have been doing for a period of time in an informal way, but it has been very effective from the standpoint of where we do joint audits. The collection section, I believe, would need some more tweaking coming from income tax in terms of where GST has been doing or getting the type of technical assistance from CARTAC. So it's a matter of more tweaking what we have been doing and then bringing income tax on board. Where we have that
now you speak of a focus group and a committee. I would hope that at some point there would be a dialogue with the stakeholders, with other stakeholders.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in the mix. But I think we wanted. What has happened in the past is we haven't really had a policy unit as such within the Ministry of Finance, and so that I think some of that is happening now. I think you might be familiar with Ms. Cynthia Castillo, who formerly
Yes.
was Commissioner of GST. She's now at the Ministry of Finance, and she has this tax background. So, what government needs to understand basically where it is before it takes that next move and begin to engage with private sector. So all of this is happening right now basically to get our house in order, to look at our strengths and weaknesses, that sort of thing, and before we take that next step. One of the things that I think needs to be mentioned as well is a code of conduct. This has always been a big issue with all the revenue departments. All types of legends about people living large and that sort of thing. There's a move to have a joint code of conduct. Is the one for customs separate?
It should be
for 3 departments.
For the 3 departments.
Yeah, but of course that would have some implications. The unions have to be involved as well. That has to go to cabinet, and there might need to be some. Certainly, the Solgen would have to be involved as well. But that is the intention. I think government is very, very serious about, if not the reality, even the perception of corruption within these departments. Something which I know is huge with the chamber.
Right.
So that is definitely one of the things. I know that has been finished, and I think it's just a matter of looking now at crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
That's a good development, because I think it's required. Well, you all are at the forefront of the revenue collection and custodians of government's money. So
yes,
it is important. It is important that the punitive tariffs fit whatever may occur also.
yes.
In terms of the shifts, the trends, I think our trading arrangements are impacting especially customs revenue, and will continue to impact customs revenue as it relates to a declining income from tariffs. That really needs to be addressed in a very considered manner, because replacing it by just straight line tax elsewhere means that we can become, most of our production will become even less competitive as it relates to exports, but also too on the domestic market. With the reducing customs tariff coming in, products will begin, or are coming into the market much cheaper. What are your thoughts on that?
I tell you, I wish I had a perfect answer to address that, because it definitely will require the best minds and the best attitudes to get this thing dealt with. It's no secret that government's traditional funding from donor funding and grants and that sort of thing, the countries that we're giving are themselves in trouble. So if we're going to have Belize in competitive, we've got to secure our own, the stability starts at home. And it means a commitment from everybody involved to having a tax system that is going to last for not just a term of a government, or that goes beyond, I think maybe through the next 20 years or so, at least. It means that there's going to have to be a realization that our taxes, that is what's going to stabilize the lease. There's no way of getting around that. So I know everybody would like to ensure that the taxes are, I think it's a question more of equity and sustainability rather than a question of not paying or not paying or not paying. And so the best minds need to come together to look at what are alternatives, perhaps what these shifts mean in terms of, I know certainly you have the risks, for example. The other day we had a situation with the tourist board, and there was a question of what services are paying accommodation tax and might be subject to GST as well. The whole question of taxes just accumulating and tax upon tax. It requires all those persons who have the responsibilities to collect to look at the big picture and to get the stakeholders involved and to have them have the attitude that it's something that's our taxes, not the government's taxes, it's our taxes. So that's what it's going to take.
I think that that dialogue is vitally important. Earlier when we were discussing the integration and the focus group and the committees, that's precisely what I was looking at, because I believe in your honing your skills and perfecting your collection methods. Some in the view of some, it appears as if though you are increasing the scope of some of the taxes being charged. And I think in that respect there is a need for a very close dialogue. A few weeks ago we had a discussion with the commissioner about it, and we agreed that we would start to share information, because I believe it's critical. The attitude and the approach, as you pointed out, is absolutely critical for us to get this thing right.
It cuts compliance costs too, big time. If you have, I am always respectful of the point of view of the taxpayer. I mean, tax is a function of two things. It's a rate times the volume of business being done. And any one of those two variables, once it becomes zero, then the tax is zero.
Precisely.
So this question of those who don't pay their fair share, that is paramount. That's something that you and I can agree with without further thought. And identifying those who don't pay, that obviously has to be a big part of it, looking at those who don't pay their fair share. And perhaps you don't need to raise a rate, you don't need to find a new tax. You need to just manage more effectively. Yeah.
No, I've seen legislation, for example, in Belgium, where the consumer is also liable if he walks out of a restaurant, for example, and he does not have a tax receipt. I'm not suggesting you go there, but I'm just saying that there's a lot that can be done to ensure that level of compliance. My own personal experiences in many of the shops around here in Belicity and in Belmopan, the likelihood of you getting a GST receipt is slim, except unless you go into one of the larger establishments that I guess are properly wired, to use that term.
Okay, let me to give you a good background on that. You indicated earlier that yes, there's a reduction of revenue inflows. We've seen that, and where our donor agencies have been, that type of funds has been dwindling. Yes, we, from GSTN, and I'm sure that Ken could speak to that from there, and where they have embarked on certain initiatives to really make taxpayers more aware of their responsibilities.
Yeah.
From our standpoint at GST, we have been, for some time now, getting taxpayers to understand the importance of demanding a tax receipt. Where one of the first things you go into an establishment and you look for that GST certificate, you know that this person is registered for GST. By all means necessary, it means that you should get a tax receipt. most of those businesses where say consumers are going and buying and do not get that receipt, they're saying that the consumer don't want the receipt. So, but when you look at the more established businesses, the practice has been where you go to that cashier, they bag your items, they staple that receipt onto you. It's not a choice for the consumer to say, I do or I do not want it. So we have embarked on that type of activity where we're encouraging consumers to demand that receipt. Once, and we had some time ago, we had some ads where we were running that. Literally, it's where consumers or business persons are double dipping.
Right.
Where they're not accounting for the GST.
I do recall that one, a very effective idea. No, but we will have to go to a break, but one of the issues you're attempting to perfect collection, I know it's not in your purview, but the issue of the spending of the money being collected. We've had several recent cases, the mortgage write-offs, for example, where it raises some eyebrows as to the utilization of the tax revenue that you guys work hard to collect. When we come back, I want us to look at, in spite of that, how will you encourage people to pay and what new initiatives you would put in place to broaden the base and to make it fair, as you say. I like your terminology of the right attitude to this.
Yes.
We must now go to our break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are now joined by Mr. Reynaldo Verde. He's a supervisor for the Taxpayer Service, Enforcement and Collection of the General Sales Tax Department. Welcome, Mr. Verde.
Thank you very much.
Before going to the break, I said we wanted to talk about encouraging people to pay, look at new initiatives, look at broadening the tax base. Can't you give us some good news, saying that the Chamber has been listed as a Grade A taxpayer, that you were giving awards?
Yes.
I didn't know that, and I'm very happy for that, so I'm saying it publicly.
Yes.
But could you give us some idea on plans that you have?
Yeah, that came out of a rewards program that we put in place last year. Because, you know, taxpayers who owe, and it's nothing is wrong with owing. There are times when all of us will have cash flow issues, but who are habitually non-compliant. They do get breaks because they do sometimes ask for waivers and so on, and it might be granted. When a debt gets too old, sometimes we have to mitigate that by, you know, writing off certain things. But what about that taxpayer who has been compliant all the time, always does the right thing? What do they get? Just, you know, a wait in the line. So we said we wanted to have this rewards program, and you have to apply for it, and the qualifications would be that you would not have violated a payment, a payment late, or you were very cooperative in when we requested information for a period of the preceding 12 months. And the Chamber applied, and the Chamber was accepted. The Chamber is a compliant A-grade taxpayer. And what it means is we have a basket of goodies, I guess you might say, that is given to the management. This is to be awarded really annually on a date, like your anniversary or whatever, you know. But it also means, besides the certificate to put up in your display, it also says that when it comes to a refund situation that you want for the Chamber or for your employees, they will go to the head of the class because you earned that. So those are the type of things. You were saying also about, just want to mention really quick about the last time we were talking with GST, the lottery thing. I think that is one of the things that GST has been considering as well. The possibility of using a lottery system for your tax receipts.
Yes, the idea was that we encourage consumers to ask for their tax invoices and tax receipt, and then to encourage people, people more compliant when you get on the reward. especially in these hard times, you know, and we're having global economic difficulties. You want to give back something. So the plan was that, okay, you ask for your receipt because, you know, the Department of General Sales Tax has been insisting on consumers to ask for their tax receipt, which assists us in monitoring registered persons or the business people at large. Now what will that do? That will entitle them to a raffle so they can win prizes, they can win cash. We did that at the beginning and inception of GST. At the first year, we did something like that, and we saw it very effective.
Yeah, it went well.
And therefore, we want to bring it back again. You know, I think the first prize was $10,000 or something like that. Right? I mean, $10,000
Quite an incentive
goes
then.
Yes, very, very much. So it's incentives like that we want to bring back, so as to reward people for assisting us in collecting the tax that we are mandated to collect. No?
Okay, good. As it relates to broadening the base, again, we were talking about reform in the previous segment, changes that we would have to undertake. Thoughts on broadening the base?
Yeah, like I said, the 75,000 is pretty much a threshold for business tax and GST, and Evan shared that that's about $300 per day. Quite a few people who are not on the roll should be on the roll. Sometimes, you know, you don't want to, maybe for the implications for GST might be different for us at business tax. It might be revenue neutral to chase certain people in terms of GST. But I think when we talk to our taxpayers, at the tax fair that we had recently, actually I shouldn't say tax fair, it should be a revenue fair. We had a revenue fair that just concluded last week, Customs, GST, Income Tax co-hosting. When we spoke to people who came by the booths, that's what they were saying. If I'm paying, my neighbor next door with the same set of circumstances, they should be paying as well. And so now you get into things like, well, how do we establish what that tax gap is? Who are those persons who are not compliant? Obvious things would be to collaborate with GST. We have access to both of each other's database to some degree. They themselves have direct information that they get from the customs in terms of imports. And there are a host of other data mining initiatives that we are currently undertaking. We're getting information from the Office of, the Ministry of Finance, for example, in terms of contracts, the Office of the Sole Gen, and quite a few other bodies who in the past we operated kind of disintegrated. Now we're saying, listen, I mean, it's time that we get our act together and see who those persons who are to be paying and where they are. There's a gentleman who is in the country, well, should be here later in this week, I think, who is doing a study for the BTB. And when he came, one of the things that came out was to identify taxpayers by sector and geography. And that requires us to look at our systems, what we have. How have we been keeping information? We might be keeping simply by trade or business. Well, what is trade and business? The shopkeeper, the man who has hardware, courts. Quite a few things come under that general category. It doesn't tell us a whole lot. Professionals, again, how about dentistry or accountancy? That sort of thing is where we need to go now and to look at specifics. Who is who and who is paying what and where are they located? So some efforts are going to be concentrated this year too.
That would be an interesting statistic set, data set, because it would begin to also point out which communities or which districts are more productive.
Yes,
at least in principle.
And the collection is one, but the audits as well. I mean, over the time, the audits have been more Belize city-centric. But you do have viable companies in the district towns. If you were to look at what was being done in the past, because of the way the systems, the departments were structured, the concentration of auditors would have almost, I know for income tax, has always been in Belize City. And so this kind of information directs your resources as well, where you need to put more management and more checks. And I expect it might be the same thing for all counterparts.
Definitely. In fact, we have been doing studies that has been going for years. We have reached a stage where we identified the necessity, for instance, for other branches to be put. Like, let's say in the north we have Corozal,
Yeah.
but yet we don't have a branch in Ridgewalk, which is, the economy is more bigger.
Yeah.
Right? We have in Kaya, we don't have in Belma, in Sainasa, sorry, but we don't have in Belmopan. Again, we have in Dangriga, but we don't have in Toledo, Punta Gorda.
Right.
And the distance alone, then you know how effective is your monitoring of those registered persons, right, of the business people. And therefore, we have seen a necessity to put branch offices all over. Right? Again, too, you need to provide a service. We keep stressing on service, to provide efficient service, to provide good service to the public and to our customers who are the registered person. And yet we have offices that are distant away, businesses that are distant away. So it is better that we put offices there and we can monitor them with a greater eye and greater concentration. And because it's unfair when we have businesses, we are ready to penalize them, but yet we were not there available when they need us on the spot.
Education,
no?
right? That's true.
And now that you raise that, I have to ask the question out of left field. I probably should have asked Evan, but on the issue of refunds, because we've had quite a bit of complaints about delays in refunds.
Okay, the issue with the refunds is generally that we hadn't been doing sufficient detailed audits on refunds, and we had found out that some of these refunds weren't merited, weren't due. In fact, in reality, we had some people out there that were claiming refunds without the proper documentation. They were taking the government and the Department of GST like a personal bank, where they can go in and just get money, you know, to maintain either a failing business or personal habits. You know, and that is why we have decided that we saw the need to go in and do. But believe me, the refunds will come, and for the big amounts especially, we try to get them out as quick as possible.
I think definitely that's probably where some additional work has to be done as it relates to articulating that issue, because the majority of the business community has the totally opposite view, in the sense that GST is using their money as interest-free banking. So I think there's quite a gap there that requires some dialogue to be filled. But anyway, that's a bit of an aside. That, as it relates to the reporting on performance, etc. How could that be done to more than just government? Do we have a structure in place, or should we put a structure in place where?
Well, the reports, again, Ministry of Finance needs to reassess. As it engages, the Ministry of Finance is the one that has headed this dialogue from the time I've been commissioner, and I guess before that, with the chamber, with the other stakeholders. And that ministry needs to look at basically what it is that's more of interest to the business community. There are already some statistics provided, for example, through SIB. And then we have our own internal structures and templates in terms of what we report. As a matter of fact, Income Tax Department just did its first annual report. Sorry, I don't have one. If you had come there Friday night, we would have given you that special one, right? Yeah, but we have an annual report which we hope to improve on, to give the kind of information that our taxpayers and students are looking for. So it's a work in progress, yeah.
We need other government departments to follow your trend then.
Well, or trend.
In terms of reporting.
Yes.
Annual reports.
Yeah.
Mr. Verde, your work. You're talking about expanding the presence in the districts.
Yes.
Beyond that, are there new initiatives, other initiatives from your department?
The other initiatives is, again, working with organizations like yourself, which we have been doing a long time, but we want to bring in the other stakeholders. We'd like to encourage schools. We lately had a revenue tax fair, and we had good participation from the primary school level.
Yeah.
But on the high school level, we only had St. John's College and Edward P. York attending. And it is at that level that we would like young people to be brought in.
Yeah.
Because especially that after high school, a lot of them move into the work field or own a little business or something. And therefore, they need to understand the tax, the importance of the tax, the procedures, the process, the policies, right? But yet, we only had 2 high schools show up. But it is quick to see that these same schools are every year, sometimes 3 times for the year, when they have Easter, summer, and Christmas vacation, they send you letters that they want the students to come and do office practice.
Yeah.
When we have the tax fair and we have these educational visits that we are open to the schools, the high schools, especially universities, to go and give them for free. You know, sometimes you don't get back the call, you don't get back the, okay, yes, you're welcome, let's have it this time. But yet, you know, we want to facilitate the children to come in and have that
Well,
office
nevertheless, I think the only saving grace to that would be that for the first time, UA was a part of it. But we had, the chamber had a booth there at the fair, as well as telemedia and tourist board, city council. But this year we had UA. And we have yet to gauge, because I think the different, we were keeping stats in terms of who was coming. The fair coincides with the filing day. So most of the taxpayers would have been passing through and that sort of thing.
One of the reasons why we're having this series on public finances, we believe that a lot of people don't have a good appreciation for what it means. There's this notion that government should do this or government should do that, and then they can't understand why government can't do it.
That's so true.
Or why government is either whether they're utilizing properly or misappropriating the government funds. And I think we absolutely need a deeper appreciation for the entire topic of public finances. We must now go to our final break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final segment. Mr. Clare, any final comments?
Just my appreciation and our department's appreciation of the fact that our taxpayers are vital to our success. And so we have got to look this year to see what else we can do to make life easier, because our mission is not to collect revenue, it's basically to ensure that you have viable, healthy businesses. So we are committed to doing that this year.
Mr. Verde, any final thoughts?
Yes, I'd like to encourage the public to get more educated on the tax system and the processes to understand. Because you need to remember that tax dollars are paid by you, the citizens. Tax dollars is supposed to go back to benefit you, the same citizens. And therefore, by understanding the tax and the importance of why the tax is collected, then we can understand why some policies and procedures need to be implemented, and why it is important then for us as consumers and as citizens to assist the department and the government and to ensure that all tax revenue is collected.
You two gentlemen ended the show perfectly with the same sentiments that I would have had, so I am left with nothing else but to say thank you for joining us tonight, and thanks to the viewing public. We see you next week. Good night.